Hello, my name is Dr. Dustin Bailey. I'm a recent PhD graduate at Grand Canyon University, and today I'd like to share my research on nomophobia and undergraduate students' perceptions of mobile learning. Imagine you're getting ready to go to a movie with your friends, and you're texting them to decide which movie you're going to watch and where you're going to watch it at. And as you head out to go to the movie, you set your smartphone down when you pick up your keys and you leave without your smartphone. When you get to the theater, you reach for your phone to text your friends to let them know you're there, and your phone is not in your pocket. Now, if you're like me, an immediate sense of panic sets in, a feeling of anxiety about what am I going to do? Well, that anxiety about not having your phone has a name, and it's called nomophobia. Nomophobia, or no mobile phone phobia, is the fear and anxiety that's experienced when individuals are unable to use their mobile phones. And this could be through either a lack of access to the phone, or no battery, or no cell phone service or signal. This carries with it negative psychological, physiological, and academic impacts, including things like anxiety and stress, depression, high blood pressure, or even impaired concentration and increased distractions in academic environments. What we're seeing is that the prevalence of nomophobia is increasing as mobile technology usage and adaptation increases as well. There are four dimensions to nomophobia. The first is not being able to communicate, which is being unable to text or call family, friends, or even use essential services. Losing connectedness is being disconnected from social networks, online presence, or digital identity. Not being able to access information is being unable to retrieve information or answers instantly by using your smartphone. And then finally, giving up convenience is losing the practical conveniences and functionalities that are provided by mobile technology. One guiding theoretical framework that informs this study is extended self theory. Extended self theory was proposed by Russell Belk and posits that individuals are using their possessions to extend and construct their self identity. According to Belk, you have a general possession, which is something that you own, which becomes a specific possession when an individual attaches identity to that possession. And then finally, a reward is provided when the satisfaction of that presence and utility comes into possession. So, for example, there's an individual that is really in love with his car. He buys a Camaro, and that becomes a general possession. But then he puts a lot of his identity into that car, and it becomes very special to him. And you can't put your muddy feet in his car, and he washes it with a baby's diaper, and you gets the jacket that says Camaro on the back and the special sunglasses. And now all of a sudden, he's put his identity into this possession. He's now the Camaro guy. And then whenever he drives around town and people say, "Hey, I like your car," or "Hey, it's the Camaro guy," and he says, "Yes, I am," that's him getting reward for a satisfaction of having his possession, this Camaro, there and being able to use it and having its presence give him rewards. This theoretical framework applies directly to nomophobia as it explains the mechanism for which smartphone attachment is established and developed. Because we extend our identities through extended self theory all the time using our mobile devices. We literally extend our identities through our mobile phones into things like our social media identities, or even the way that we represent ourselves with our families and our friends through group chats or other technology based communication. Smartphones are the most ubiquitous tools that we have in our daily lives. And its ubiquity is evident in that 94% of all adults in the United States are within 3 feet of a mobile device at any given time. This is especially true with undergraduate students, 98% of whom have a smartphone and use it multiple times daily. These students are interconnected with their phones in a way that no other generation has been and use them in every aspect of their lives, including societal, commercial, academic, and interpersonal contexts. Universities have discovered this, and that the current undergraduate students want to practically do everything on their phones, including their education. And this has resulted to an increase in an implementation of something called mobile learning or M-learning. M-learning is defined as the acquisition of knowledge, skills, and abilities through the utilization of mobile technology. There are different forms of M-learning, including formal M-learning, which is provided or endorsed by education providers and is part of their systems or curriculum, things like learning management systems like Halo or Blackboard, or school-hosted medias or portals where you can find video recordings. There's informal M-learning, which is related to formal learning in that it deals with the formal education, but it's sought out by the learner as a supplement or in addition to the curriculum. Things like Khan Academy, Duolingo, or Quizlet that help study or learn more materials. And then finally, ad hoc M learning is just in time learning that addresses a variety of personal development needs that may or may not be related to formal education at all. Anything from using TikTok to learn the most recent TikTok dance craze to something I've done recently, which is use YouTube to learn how to change the oil filter on a new car that I've just purchased. As with nomophobia, M learning continues to increase in availability and popularity as mobile technology becomes more sophisticated and more readily adopted. Another guiding theoretical framework that informs this study is the Technology Acceptance Model, or TAM. TAM was developed by Fred Davis and proposes that individuals accept and use technology based on two primary factors: perceived usefulness and perceived ease of use. Perceived usefulness deals with whether or not an individual is going to be able to perform a task or achieve a goal based on the use of the technology. Perceived ease of use is this an easy to learn or easy to use technology in the first place? Depending on whether something is perceived to be easy to use or useful, that will determine the attitude towards using the technology itself, which then leads to the behavioral intent or a plan to use it, which then leads to actual use. This theoretical framework establishes perceived usefulness and perceived ease of use as the two primary factors that will lead towards mobile learning attitudes, adoption, and use. The study for the predictive relationship between nomophobia and M-learning was an opportunity to mitigate potential harm. As adoption of smartphone usage increases, more individuals are exposed to the negative psychological, physiological, and academic impacts associated with nomophobia. Compounding this risk is a growing trend of universities to permit, adopt, and encourage smartphone use in their academic environments. This can create a potential feedback loop that could enhance the presence of both nomophobia and the impact of nomophobia on university learners. Examining whether a predictive relationship exists between nomophobia and M-learning represents the initial steps to learning more about the nature and the degree of this risk. The study also meets a gap in the existing literature. There's a significant lack of research on nomophobia as it pertains to M-learning environments. Additionally, there's limited research on nomophobia within the United States, as the majority of the literature is from Europe and Asia. And finally, previous researchers looked into M-learning on older mobile phones. Current smartphones have a much higher functionality and integration, which shifts the impact of nomophobia and the use of mobile learning significantly, which is why the purpose of this quantitative, non-experimental, correlative predictive study is to examine to what extent the dimensions of nomophobia together and individually predict perceived usefulness and perceived ease of use of M-learning in undergraduate students in the United States who have smartphones. There are two research questions that were addressed in the study. The first asks, to what extent do the dimensions of nomophobia together and individually predict perceived usefulness of M-learning? The first hypothesis deals with whether or not the dimensions of nomophobia collectively or together are significantly predictive of perceived usefulness. And then the next set of hypotheses deal with each of the individual dimensions of nomophobia and whether or not they significantly predict perceived usefulness of M-learning. And the second research question was, to what extent do the dimensions of nomophobia together and individually predict perceived ease of use of mobile learning? And they have hypotheses that mirror those of the first research question. The unit of analysis for the study was undergraduate students, with a population of interest being all undergraduate students who live in the United States. The target population was undergraduate students who are 18 to 24 years old, live in the United States, have smartphones, and are accessible through Sentiment's research participation pool. This is the third-party provider of research participants that was used for the study. Our a priori G-power analysis at 80% power recommended 85 participants, but that was increased by 15% to allow for straight lining, speed completions, and outliers for a total of a required 98 participants to reach the required power for our study. I was fortunate to have 171 participants involved in the study. Demographic questions provided insights into the sample. For example, all of the age groups in the study were evenly represented. Participants came from 33 different states, with California, Texas, and New York providing the highest number of responses, and responses being representative of all regions in the country. Participation was greater amongst those in early years in school, with roughly 3/4 of the participants pursuing bachelor's degrees, and the majority of them attending full-time. Now, here's what we learned about perceived usefulness. The overall model significantly predicted perceived usefulness of M-learning, explaining 14.7% of the variance. Now, looking specifically at the not able to access information dimension, higher AI-related nomophobia was associated with higher perceptions of m-learning's usefulness. What this means is that the higher the overall levels of nomophobia are, the higher the perception of m-learning usefulness is. And this more specifically, individuals that report a greater level of not being able to access information as part of their nomophobia also tend to see mobile learning as more useful. The overall statistical model was significantly predicting perceived ease of use of m-learning, explaining 15.1% of the variance. Looking specifically at the AI and NC dimensions, the higher levels of both not being able to access information and not being able to communicate were associated with higher perceptions of mobile learning's ease of use. What this tells us is that people that report higher levels of nomophobia, particularly in the not being able to access information and not being able to communicate areas, actually see m-learning as easier to use. Here are the practical implications for the study. First off, institutions that support mobile learning will need to be able to prioritize accessibility and continuity of information as core aspects of platform design. What we've seen is that disruptions to information access can create significant anxiety, which may negatively influence perceptions of mobile learning's usefulness and ease of use. There's a strong need for seamless and uninterrupted access to digital course materials. Instructional designing strategies may also benefit from incorporating content delivery methods that allow for redundancy, including both streaming and downloadable formats. Offline access capabilities are critical design features for users that are affected by nomophobia. These design features, such as cached content, intuitive influences, real-time feedback, as well as technical assistance, they can support users vulnerable to anxiety from access disruptions. And then finally, balanced device use strategies may support digital learning while reducing risks associated with overdependence. The alignment between policy and psychological research strengthens institutional responsiveness to students' digital well-being. This study did have some limitations associated with it as well. The study was limited by using an online service participant provider applicant pool from Sentiment, which restricted participation to individuals who had existing relationships with the provider. While that may limit broader generalizability or applicability to a wider population, using a well-established and reputable survey participant provider like Sentiment mitigated those limitations risks. Also, the study utilized self-reporting, and self-reported data is usually prone to biases such as social desirability and recall inaccuracies, which can affect the validity of findings. Participant anonymity was used within the study to mitigate against some of those issues related to self-reporting. Finally, non-humans or bots can complete surveys and the responses aren't always detectable. This can harm the quality of the survey data by submitting answers that are random, repetitive, or inconsistent with how humans typically respond. And that can lead to inaccurate results and weaken the study's conclusions. To mitigate against that, the study used attention check questions that were incorporated into the instrument to help detect and remove non-human and otherwise invalid responses. Recommendations for future research include longitudinal studies. This current study used cross-sectional data, providing a static snapshot of predictive relationships at a single point in time. Longitudinal studies are needed to observe how the relationship between nomophobia and m-learning evolves over time. Future research could determine if students with nomophobia, if their levels change as their m-learning experience matures, or research could also determine if the consistent positive experiences with m-learning mitigate nomophobia dimensions over a longer haul. Future research could also be used to explore mediating variables such as mobile self-efficacy, prior m-learning experiences, and the degree of self-extension that explains how nomophobia dimensions influence perceptions of mobile learning. Finally, replicating this study into diverse cultural and regional contexts may help reveal how social cultural factors shape the prevalence of nomophobia and its influence on m-learning perceptions and behaviors, providing valuable comparative insights. If you have need for more information about the topic or you want to learn more about it, here are some key resources and references that can provide a deeper look into the research and the topics that are included. Or if you need more information about the study, please reach out to me directly. I'd be happy to help. I'd also like to acknowledge a group of amazing scholars without whom this research would not have been possible. Thank you so much for your time.